arguably, that they were responsible for the downfall of local news, maybe the downfall of national.
MSNBC anchor Katie Tur takes on corporate media. She blames two people for the demise of TV news: her parents. They were the husband and wife Los Angeles TV news helicopter crew, famous for starting the trend of shooting live, but often meaningless, high-speed police chases on the news.
You're listening to the OVIS-IT podcast with Tracy Grant.
Welcome, everyone, to the OVIS-IT podcast. I'm Tracy Grant, the chief correspondent for OVIS, the only news platform that combines the best of cryptocurrency with social media and rewards people for telling the truth. Today's topic: TV News' obsession with meaningless, high-speed police pursuits, or anything else they can take live for live's sake. We're discussing how these stories exemplified what's wrong with the current business model of ratings and clicks. My guest today is OVIS founder Linton Johnson. Before creating OVIS, Linton spent more than 30 years as a communication strategist, as well as an award-winning primetime news anchor for NBC, ABC, and other networks around the country. Linton graduated with a bachelor's degree in journalism from Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. So, Linton.
Yes.
Okay. Remember when cable news first got its start in the 80s?
No, because I was too young. Just kidding.
Okay. We're supposed to be telling the truth, right? That's what anyway. Okay, cable news got its first start in the 80s, but it wasn't really until the 90s when it really began to take off. And it all pretty much started with high-speed chases aired live on TV. I remember those, and definitely in LA, they are still famous for constantly doing those. And
like crack cocaine for TV there.
True. Yeah. And when you think about it, though, because of that, like, what's the most famous high-speed chase that you've ever watched on TV? That's
O.J. Simpson, right?
Everybody knows where they were when that happened. Everybody was watching.
Well,
that.
I don't know because I was not alive.
Well, your kindergarten teacher must have turned it
on. You're so sweet, Tracy.
But why do you think those live high-speed chases were so popular?
Well, because, the live element, you have no idea what's going to happen, right? And so you're just kind of glued to the TV set. And I think the biggest problem, though, is that there was real action, real news that needed to be covered, stories that were meaningful that could help change people's lives. But they blew all that out just so they could just watch the potential of a car crashing in front of a police car or going off the road or something crazy happening. And then that excluded all the serious stuff that we really needed to be talking about, politics, religion, poverty, all these other things that we as a community need to discuss so we can find solutions to these issues. That went out the window for a live shot, and that's and it's only because of the ratings and clicks, right? Because they knew people would watch, but they weren't giving them anything of value for the most part. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the big problem and continues to be a big problem with live TV.
I mean, think about how many times in your career you did a story that you were pretty proud of, ready to go live on TV and talk about it. And suddenly in your ear, they tell you, sorry, we're moving on. There's a high-speed chase, or there's something on fire, or a garbage can on fire.
The fires are ridiculous. Like, okay, so, I mean, how many times have I seen the hillside burn? There are no houses. Right? There are no houses actually being threatened, or they're miles away, but we've got to watch live coverage of the fire at the expense of things that we can really help society with. Obviously a fire is important if it's going to be threatening people's homes. But when there's like a warehouse with nobody in it and that's burning up, and they have to go live and spend 10 minutes of, time on something that doesn't have a lot of human impact, simply for the sake of ratings and clicks, it really diminishes the value of news. I mean, you kind of get an instant gratification, some short-term gain for some long-term pain, and that pain is that the information that should be getting out there for us to be able to make decisions on our lives and improve our society and encouraging democracy, well, those just go by the wayside. Those stories disappear. So I think that's this business model of ratings and clicks. It's live for live's sake. It's not about providing context and meaningful dialogue on important issues that will help in our democracy.
Exactly. Because, there are reporters out there who are doing education stories and, you name it, all sorts of health stories, and they're literally standing there in front of the camera waiting to do that.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, boom, it's over because the producer has chosen to take that chase instead of doing the more substantive story.
So you're on the 10 o'clock. I remember covering some really serious issues. In fact, the reason why I left NBC as an anchor and reporter was basically kind of for that very reason. I was the transportation reporter at NBC, and I got to do I broke the story on this new Bay Area Rapid Transit District station, BART, which is a major commuter rail in the Bay Area. Was building a new station, what was called an infill station, that would serve hundreds of thousands of commuters, relieve traffic congestion, and the deal was finally done, and I broke that story. Well, on my way to finalize an interview, I was told that I needed to cover this warehouse fire, which is about 100 miles away from the viewing area, but it was a fire. And I'm like, well, first of all, if we cover it, no one's going to see it. I mean, it's not in our viewing area. It's not meaningful to the people in the Bay Area because it was in Stockton. And then number two, there was nobody in the building. And number three, I'm on my way to finalizing this really major story that does have impact. And you want me to go 100 miles out of my way. I was like, why can't you send the chopper? Like, that's going to get there faster. And they said, well, the chopper costs too much money.
Oh, gosh.
And I was like, this is ridiculous. And so literally, I was actually interviewing for BART. They had asked me to interview because I cover them all the time, and they needed another spokesperson. And right after that call, when they told me to go to the warehouse fire, I got a call from BART, and they offered me a job. And I accepted it without even knowing what the salary was because I was so frustrated with NBC. I was like, yes! And then I was like, oh, maybe I should know what the salary is. But that's how much I was sick and tired of this ratings and clicks business model. And now it's going for stories that are meaningful in people's lives.
Absolutely. You were fed up. I completely understand. And it's interesting because NBC correspondent Katie Tur talks about the demise of local and national news. She says there's a direct link between the police chases of the 90s, the way the media covered Trump in 2016, and the way the media covers politics in general today. She says the media mantra is don't digest it, just put it on the air. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. It's live, like you were saying earlier, it's live for live's sake. As like with the police chases, you're wondering what's going to happen next, right? It's just basically reality television on the news. And there's no context to it. And that's kind of the big problem with it. When she was talking about Trump, I think she was specifically mentioning the Mueller hearing and how when the Attorney General got there and kind of digested the findings of the Mueller hearing, they just covered that live without kind of taking a step back and trying to put it into context. So basically the word of the AG was the official word, the official narrative of the story of the Mueller report. So Mueller had his narrative, and then the AG took pieces and pieces of it that created a narrative that worked for Trump, which is, his right to do. But the media is supposed to be a check on government, right? Mm-hmm. And be able to kind of give all sides of a story, all narratives to a story, so people can come up, with their own conclusions. But what happens in a live situation is that there's only one narrative being streamed at you, and if it's the first time you've heard this narrative, then then it sets the narrative for all the other stories. And so, and then without any context, as someone is talking live or saying whatever they're saying, the media doesn't provide the viewers with the context to be able to interpret what was just said or give alternate viewpoints, factually based viewpoints to the narrative that's being spewed. And then, of course, as reporters, kind of like the chopper situation, where I asked, why don't you send the chopper? And they said they didn't have enough money. The news corporations are cutting back, so the profits get bigger and bigger. They're cutting back on staff. And, and often in many cases, the staff are younger and younger, so they don't have the historical context to be able to provide when these live events happen. So you have less experienced staff, you have less resources, and you're just doing live for live's sake. And then last thing I'd say about the live is it's cheap to do. You just point a camera and turn it on live. There's no editing, right? You don't have to write a script. And if you got 30 minutes to fill, you can kill a lot of other stories that would require a lot more work by just letting things stream live. So it's not a great business model, at least not for the protection of our democracy.
And it's interesting that she brings up Trump, because that is what a lot of people have said about him, during his campaign, during his presidency, that, some of these cable news channels and networks, you can't just let them off the hook. But
Nope.
He was always having some sort of live event with, these crowds that adored him, and they would just take the event because, they thought, he might say something crazy, or, let's just put exactly. Let's just turn the cameras on and let it roll. And then in the end, you have this like hour or 2 hours of this event, this campaign event that is somewhat meaningless in the grand scheme of things, and also may tip the balance in terms of which candidate is being covered more than the other. But it's a way to eat up time. It's a way to eat up time and
get ratings
and get ratings. Exactly.
So, some politician can be, crazy and just say whacked out things to get people's attention. Mm-hmm. Another one who's not crazy, who's very sane, but, is trying to solve the problems of society, but isn't a nutcase. That person won't get the coverage, even though we need that person to have the coverage because they're actually trying to do something. While the whack job is just crazy, and they get all the live coverage. And let's look crazy because he's fun to watch. Meantime, society is went into the toilet.
Absolutely. Coming up on the OVIS-IT podcast, we'll take a look at how the Ovis community is building a place for news that's radically better. We'll be right back.
Join the movement. Be part of a global community that's ready to end fake news by incentivizing the truth. It's simple. All you have to do is go to ovisnews.com and follow us on social with a few clicks.
Welcome back to the OVIS-IT podcast. Today's topic: cable news' obsession with meaningless high-speed police pursuits and other live stories for live's sake. We've discussed how live TV exemplifies what is so wrong with the current business model of ratings and clicks. So what's the solution? For more on that, let's talk with Ovis founder, Linton Johnson. Linton, tell us about how Ovis works.
Well, Ovis is a people power platform. So the decision making, unlike with corporate media and for the most part with social media, is made from the bottoms up. Just the stories themselves, how a story is selected, is determined by we the peoples, not by the corporate overlords, as people like to say. But story selection is where the bias begins in corporate media. It's where the bias ends with the Ovis community, because we the people get to decide what the stories are instead of just a few select folks. And so the way it works on Ovis is that on our platform, which we were the first company to develop this platform and put it on the blockchain, where people can submit story ideas, and then other people can upvote those story ideas and help fund them, almost like a crowdfunding platform, right? But you see a story on there and like, oh yeah, let's talk about what we're talking about today. What's the impact of high-speed chases on ratings and clicks in our social construct today? You could submit that as a story idea, and then people go, yeah, I want to know about that. And so I'll upvote that story, and I will dedicate. I'm going to make this number up, just make it easy math, $1 for that story, and then 1,000 other people want to hear about that story as well. So each one gives $1. So that's $1,000 to write that story. So a journalist is going to see on our platform, wow, that story, if I write that and it's trustworthy, verifiable, and accountable, will come with $1,000 purse. So the journalist will write that story, but it can't be published just because the journalist wrote it. We need to make sure it's trustworthy, verifiable, and accountable. And the way we do that is that we have fact checkers. These are certified independent fact checkers that will look at the story. And it's not one fact checker, it's a minimum of 3 fact checkers who look at that story. Now, who are these fact checkers? They're you. They're everyday people who we train, and the training is right now. We want to send them to the Night Science Journalism Fact Checking Project at MIT. We have a relationship with them. We're trying to form a partnership with them. But eventually, what we want to do is have an OVIS Academy where we, the people, get to decide on how to train fact checkers. We'll of course use experts to help guide us on that. But the idea is for everyday people to become certified independent fact checkers. Now back to this example here. So once the fact checkers look at the story, at least 2/3 of them must come to consensus that the facts are correct. And if 2/3 do, then that story gets published to the platform. So all along the way, what's really interesting about this, never before in history have we had the technology to be able to handle this process in an authentic way. And here's what I mean by that. Now, for you computer nerds out there, kind of like myself, technology nerds, there's a technology called blockchain technology, which allows for us to be able to effectively require people to put money where their mouth is. So when I was saying upvote a story and put $1 down, the fact checkers also have to put a little bit of money down. So as a journalist, that they're going to fact check this story and be trustworthy, verifiable, and accountable when doing that. Same thing for the journalist, because at any point, if someone challenges the information, then that money that the fact checker put down or the journalist put down could be taken away from them. So basically, we're trying to put our money where our mouth is. If I'm a journalist, I'm saying I am so certain that this story is truthful that I'm willing to put my money down on it. Fact checkers are saying the same thing. And then if anybody wants to challenge that, we have a challenging process, they can. But the whole idea here is to hold people accountable and put real teeth, real guardrails in. So that way, when the stories come out, they're truthful or as truthful as possible. And if for some reason there's a mistake in there or an outright lie, we can hold the right people accountable for it.
So what you're saying is by doing it the way OVIS is doing it, it can eradicate the business model of ratings and clicks that has led to eroding people's trust in the news.
Absolutely, because what we're doing is incentivizing the exact thing that we want, and that's the truth. Ratings and clicks, all that business model does is incentivize bigger ratings and more clicks. So what people do is do whatever they can in order to get bigger ratings and clicks. They're not incentivizing the truth, they're incentivizing ratings and clicks. So what we're trying to do is bring people back to what everybody wants, the truth.
And that empowers the OVIS community, right? And they can trust the information that they're being provided.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about it. Anybody can challenge on the OVIS platform a story, and they will have a lot of weight when they want to challenge that. I mean, there are guardrails in place to make sure that people don't challenge frivolously, or if they do, even they can be checked and have their money taken away. So you don't want to launch a challenge just to launch a challenge. Mm-hmm. But if you think you're right, you're also going to have to put money where your mouth is. But what it's doing is it's giving everybody on the platform the power to be able to hold people responsible and accountable for the information that's out there. Now think about the current business model of ratings and clicks. Especially with social media, the internet. Anybody can hide behind the anonymity of the internet, and put any information out there, and it can spread like wildfire, but you don't know if it's true. And there's no way to hold the person who put that information out there accountable.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, this is the reason why people don't trust the internet, what's on the internet. What we're trying to do is restore the public's trust in media.
Okay. Well, obviously we believe in the idea. We're hoping that people out there are also interested in this idea and they want to join us on this journey. That does it for us on the OVIS-IT podcast. I'm Tracy Grant. Be sure to join the movement at ovisnews.com. Thanks for watching.